Hi, and welcome to the Politics of Justice. It's me, Amy Austin. I'm back for more from Judged. So, when we left off at chapter 10, and now we're at the beginning of chapter 11. And in chapter 11, it is called, I should, it should be better, but I do have chapter titles here. An Auspicious Visit. So, it's still October, and the scene starts in Judge Grant's courtroom. And I wrote this because I wanted to give you a sense of what it's like to be a judge and the authority they have. In like 99% of cases, they're sort of gods in the classroom, in the courtroom. So obviously we have a justice system. Well, how it's working now, it's a different conversation. But we have a justice system. And while, we have the idea of appeals and going to like intermediate appellate courts in the state, Supreme Courts are the highest court in the state. They're not all called the Supreme Court. Or in the alternative, we also have the option in the justice system of appealing to the Supreme Court. They can take cases or not take cases, as it were. And there's always this sense that there's like a higher authority that we can appeal to, and eventually justice will be served. Um, but the truth of the matter is that most cases are disposed of in the lowest court where they're heard, and the judge has a lot of sway and a lot of authority over that. And well, different judges handle it differently. There's a whole I could go into a whole song and dance about that. Um, Let me just suffice it to say that some judges handle it well and some judges lord it over, you know, power corrupts. And so some people really just use it however they want. But the truth of the matter is that as an attorney, you do know that the lower court is your first best, sometimes last best chance. And so you have to present the best case you can in that, given the judge that you have. And so I just wanted to show Sheila's sense of power. So in this scene, she's a federal judge. 50% is civil litigation, of generally wealthier clients, corporations. There's a very specific list of cases that federal judges can handle. Um, a lot of them, the other ones are like civil rights, EEOC, those kinds of things. The other things they handle are criminal cases. And that's federal criminal cases, which in the era that I've lived have been many, 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 many drug cases, stemming from the war on drugs. Started in the 80s with Ronald Reagan. But in this case, she's just handling. Okay, this is just me for humor, but the corporate defendant in this case, the one who's probably withholding discovery as corporate defendants are wont to do from time to time, is called amalgamated conglomerated. It's limited. It's just a joke because the corporations are so big and the individual plaintiffs are so small. And they have a phalanx of lawyers and they will do a lot in their power to make it difficult for defendants to get an advantage. But in this case, she slaps them down and makes sure that they order that they provide the discovery that they were holding back. But so the court empties out, and this young woman runs into the courtroom and asks. So she asks, "Can I help you?" And I will say this: so courtrooms, for the most part, not always in juvenile, and there's some exceptions, are open. We have like open courtroom laws. Even the Supreme Court is actually open. They just aren't televised, although they are recorded. So we have open courtroom laws. They're public. You can go in and watch cases. But for some reason, judges get a little nervous when people are back there. And like usually at the end of the day, they're always like, if there are people left over, they're like, can I help you? As if it's not a public forum. But nonetheless, so the courtroom's empty, this except for this one young black woman in the back, and Sheila's like, can I help you? Because I'm done for the day or the morning session and you need to go. So the person in the back is her name is Young. I forgot her first name, and she is the caseworker, social worker that has been assigned to Olivia Grant. So in the last one, you know that somebody called the hotline on Sheila, and when the hotline is called, there's a first line caseworker. They're actually called social worker investigator, who comes out to make a determination of whether or not a child should be removed from the home. They do have to make, like, there's some, I'm sure there's statutory rule. I'm sure it's like 24, between 24 and 86 hours. They have to make a determination if the child's in danger and if they need to be removed. So Young is in the back of the room. Sheila's like, high on the bench. She's like, "Can I help you? Clearly you are in the wrong place. Um, what can I do? What can we do to help you get you out of here?" Um, and the bailiff is like, "Step back, don't get too close to the judge." And this is actually before 9/11, when we had even more security in courtrooms, but the bailiffs do keep people away from the judges. And so she finally says, "It's about your daughter, um, Olivia." I mean, sorry, about her daughter Olivia. Sheila invites her to the back. She's like, "Is everything okay?" Because God knows, I mean, as a parent, you don't want the phone call. I mean, I have my phone off right now, but it's set to like let like two or three people through. One is my son, and the other is the school. So if it rings, it's always like, it is something. Obviously, in my experience, it's actually never been anything more than, "He's sick, come get him. Can he talk to you? His tummy hurts," or whatever. But that you do have that moment when you're like, "What's wrong with my kid?" So she's at that panic moment, and a Young is like, "No, no, no, everything's fine, but I need to talk to you." So she has her come in the back. Oh, her name is Celeste Young. She's an intake worker. Um, and she says, "I'm responsible for moving kids from unsafe homes." And Sheila immediately goes to the fact that these like young suburban girls who don't have a sense of danger have somehow gotten Olivia into trouble. In my head, she's imagining like some kind of drugs or something. And that is a worry. I'm not gonna be unclear that, like, I've talked to even my son about this. Just because other kids are doing something, if they're doing something illegal, you need to like step away, because you may not be as lucky as they are. So she says, "Your daughter's at school, but we have a reason to think that she's going to be taken away." And Celeste Young does the thing that she would do with any other, mostly poor, mostly Black parent, which is like, "You have to fill out these papers immediately, agreeing to like whatever plan we have like put in place, and let you know that you were taking your kid." Sheila's an attorney before she's, first and foremost, so she's not signing anything. She runs out and she runs to the school. So, chapter 12 is removal of the child from the home. And it's titled that because that's how they always often referred to the idea. It's going to be, this is the removal of the child from the home. It's so formal, but so awful at the same time. Actually, before I started recording, I was like cleaning out the folders on my laptop, because even with a terabyte, I'm getting to the "you have too much storage" problem, and I'm just like moving stuff out. But one of the things I came across is a graphic I'd created maybe last year, where I guess I read in some book that 90 to 95% of children who have been in five or more foster care placements are going to be involved in the criminal justice system. And all I could think is like, as I'm like swiping by it, is, if we know the result, why do we still put kids in the system? Because I don't know if the result on the other end is worse. I mean, I'm not saying that kids should be subject to abuse, but it seems like a flip of the coin, and either way, it may or may not go well. But once you remove them, you've put them in a system that can grind them up and spit them out. Anyway, so Olivia is like sitting in geography, bored out of her mind. Um, and like, she's thinking about a schoolhouse rock of state capitals. I assume that one exists. So Allison, the counselor, comes in and pulls her out. And, they're like, "Gather up your books," right? And she's like, really, the counselor's not looking at her, but she's having that sort of mortifying feeling. I don't even know if kids do this anymore, but like when I was a kid, when somebody was like called on the that they had a phone back then, like some kind of internal landline, or somebody came to get you, everybody in the class went, ooh, because it was either good, like you were going to get to go home early, or it was bad and something was going to happen. But it broke up the day, and it made kids interested. So like that's like, so Olivia's immediately worried that like her mom died, her dad died, her aunt died, that's the first thought. So fortunately the counselor is not completely lacking in empathy, and she said, okay, no, your mom's fine, no one's hurt, but we need to hurry. So she's like running to the office, and she's like, there's a different worker, there's a lot of workers initially. It's very, I can't imagine the chaos for children when they're removed from the home and there's like all these different people around, none of whom are going to be their permanent worker or their ongoing social worker. So this one is named Bernice Johnson, who's a social worker. Um, and the thing that Olivia feels right now is this huge sting of betrayal because, well, A, she didn't understand the phrase mandated reporter. And I don't think people always explain that to children in the way that they should. Well, not that children can all make their own choices because they are children, but I do wish that they understood mandated reporter. Some people do explain it to children, like, if you tell me this, I have to tell, but otherwise I can keep things confidential. But at this phase, Olivia is under the belief that what she had said was confidential, and like the huge amount of betrayal she's feeling isn't great, because I do know, like, personally, that if I I would have, many of us were counseled to keep our business at home, whether it was bad, good, or indifferent, and I would have not said anything, because you don't ever know what you're walking into. Or in the case of me, because I had visited children in foster care, I would have known what I was walking into, and God knows I didn't want to walk into it. Um, so she's sitting here, and then her mom runs in, and she says, Olivia says this whole thing, take me home. These people say I can't go home with you. Fix it, mom. And although she knows her mom is problematic, what she wants now more than anything is for things to be fixed and returned to the way they were, as imperfect as they were. So, chapter 13 is the best interest of the child, and that is the standard, the gold standard, both for like abuse and neglect, as well as for like actually custody cases. The idea is that courts, and the law is always trying to do what's in the best interest of the children. Given the statistic I shared, we can debate whether it's actually true, but that is the gold standard, and in theory, what everybody is always working toward. Um, so, she's there with her daughter, and she knows, Sheila, that she can't take them home. So, chapter 14 is called The Blue Wall. I don't know when I encountered the phrase, I think in New York as a kid, the idea that, and this doesn't actually apply to this chapter, but it's the idea that police put up this blue wall, and behind it is secrecy and procedure, and it's not really shared with the public. Um, and, I think I just wanted the sense in this chapter that Olivia is facing this super opaque process, and she's sitting at this point in a police station because while they would take kids from the home because that was an emergency, they didn't always have a place for that kids to go. So there's like a whole emergency foster care system, or a list of foster care parents who can take children, obviously, when they're taken in those circumstances. But before they take them, they don't always make the arrangements for finding the emergency shelter. I mean, I guess I get it, but this is not like they're burning the children or something. So could she have stayed one more day? I don't know. But once things are put into motion, you really can't get out. It's like the system starts grinding and the gears start grinding and they don't come to a halt. So while she was like removed from school, removed from her environment, had to like hug her mom and say goodbye, she is sitting 4 hours in the police station, with the officer. She calls him Officer Fitzpatrick, as a new babysitter. And she's sitting there thinking, in my day, I would have left geography, had lunch, I'd have been starting art class. And she realizes that starting now, her life has changed. It's like, this is a thing, actually, which I think is probably necessary in books for a story to move forward, but it's actually my favorite part in books, and that's when the protagonist realizes that nothing is going to be the same, because then you're like in, as a reader, you're like in it with them, because you're like, oh my god, the world you left really isn't going to be the same, and here I am for you, um watching you navigate whatever is coming. um so she's sitting there, it's 1 o'clock, she's sitting there, it's 2:30, she's sitting there, it's 3:30. I mean, at this point, she's even real. She's reading her schoolwork. She's sitting there. It's 4, and she's hungry. Um, and she's like knocking on the door, and she was like, the person who's behind the bulletproof glass is now somebody different. And she's like, "Do you know when you're leaving?" And the woman's like, "Who are you?" And she's like, she explains, "I'm Olivia Grant. My social worker is supposed to take me somewhere. I'm kind of hungry." So the woman is, again, not without sympathy. Um, Goes around, gets her like a bag of Funyuns from the dispenser. I don't think I've ever had Funyuns, but there was a thing called onion rings as a kid that I had once. Interesting idea, um, for processed food. I don't know, just fascinating to me as a kid. Um, so she's like now like remembering what it's like with her mom, and like sort of reminiscing about what she's gonna miss. She didn't always like the way it was, but it was something she could ultimately count on. And she's remembering, going to her Cleveland, friend's house, and her mom showing up late, like not necessarily sober, and how mortifying that is. And then also the other time she'd had Funyuns was with her mom at a liquor store. Or, oh, in, so when I was in New York, I remember going to liquor stores with my mom, because in New York, like, alcohol is very separate from food. I still am struck here in California when you can go to the store and there's like alcohol in the grocery store. Because even like in New York, when they opened the Trader Joe's, there was like Trader Joe's, the food store, and then right next door was Trader Joe's, like the resale wine and alcohol, outlet. But they were two separate things. They're always separate. So to me, that was a lot of regulation. California was like, you can buy alcohol almost whenever. I think you can't buy it on Sunday. I'm not sure. I think I saw like a tarp once. But what's interesting is that when I lived in Ohio, they have, do they call it, is it like alcohol beverage control? They have these stores, like a separate state store, county, state, where you have to go to buy alcohol. So in the book, that's where Sheila is going to buy alcohol and take Olivia with her. And it's, she goes often enough that the people recognize her there, so she's minorly embarrassed, about it. And there's like an old guy, you know, the kind who likes to have you sit on their lap. There were many old men like that when I was a kid, which I now realize as an adult is so inappropriate. Hey, come give me some sugar. Like they want you to kiss them, you as a young girl. These old men. Oh, anyway, I probably put that in because I'm disgusted by them as an adult. And nothing more to say about that. So now we're at chapter 15, where I have a highlight. And so Casey is, it's called, chapter 15 is emergency custody. So again, I can see what I'm doing here. It's like so obvious to me now, as a leader in my writing career, is that Casey's, in court for emergency custody for a different kid, probably the kid that she, saw in chapter 1, whatever his name was, and, Nelson, DeAndre Nelson. And I think I put this chapter in here because I wanted to not necessarily foreshadow, but I wanted to show again what the system is like. And now you know that Olivia, having been removed, from her mom in this emergency situation, is now going to be thrown into the system. So in this case, Casey's a guardian ad litem for this infant. The caseworkers, this woman named Trish, I guess I don't know if it was Patricia, but Trisha Pachenko. And the thing that you know that I'm showing and that I talk about in this chapter is that Trish is one of those, social workers. There are many types, but this is one type where she like walks in and will pull the guardian aside. And at that time, I represented both parents, and I was often a guardian. Obviously, can't be this both in the same case. They would pull me aside as the guardian and be like, "Psst, look, this mom is a problem. I've like decided like what should happen. You need to go along. You don't even need to talk to anybody. I know you have a statutory obligation to talk to people, but I know also know you get paid $250. So if you just take my word for it, let's just remove the kids and move on to the next case." Because they wanted to achieve their objective. I'm not, let's just say they wanted to achieve their objective. And as a guardian, if you came with your own like investigation and your own theory, you could be an obstacle to what they had decided was in the child's best interest. And she's encountering this in this case. Trish says, "Look, I've taken all the other mom's kids. We just took the infant because we already know this is a dangerous house. You know, just go along to get along. We can adopt this kid out, keep it moving." And I remember encountering this like they would take, so if a parent had lost other children to the system, they would often take a newborn. It depends, but it depends on a lot of factors, but it happened often enough based on either like a positive drug test, which is one thing, but often based on the fact, only fact being that the other kids had been taken. And if the other kids hadn't been returned, then clearly something was wrong with the environment. And so they shouldn't have this, put this new baby into this environment. So the problem with having a baby as a guardian is obviously babies don't talk. So at that point, you were talking to the parents and maybe the other kids, although sometimes they have a different guardian, and trying to assess what the situation is. But with the non-talking clients, then other people obviously can have a greater influence. And what I found, and I think what I particularly found disturbing, is that it's as if they had like decided these infants were up. So there's clearly there are always families who are like who are waiting through the state adoption system separate from a private adoption system, and available infants are do not meet the demand. The available supply of infants do not meet the demand. And so there were social workers who were willing to take an infant, adopt them out to meet this demand. I think their idea was that the child was just going to be better off, so just like pull it away from the mom, as if the mothers have no feelings. So in this note, she had said this, and I highlighted here went the wrench because Casey's like, I'm not going to just like go along. So the magistrate says, "Casey, is it?" And she goes, here went the wrench. "Magistrate, I think permanent custody is the wrong way to go." Everyone's stilled. Great. I love talking to a room full of silence. So when I was new, I did this the whole time. I didn't do this job long. I really thought that after my training, I was under the impression that I could and did exercise independent judgment. When people are in a system, they're not looking for independent judgment. Often they're looking for a rubber stamp. And to meet the statutory obligations of, "We look, we had an independent person come in." Um, and so the note I wrote at the same time is juvenile court is a go along to get along kind of place. Most attorneys rarely push back against the system. And this is true. I don't know if it was because they had so many cases that they needed to like do so many to earn money out of sheer exhaustion. Maybe they didn't care. I don't know. I can't speculate as to other people's motives, but there was a lot of rubber stamping both in juvenile and in criminal. So the next chapter is also emergency custody, but part two. And in this case, it's Sheila going through that same system with the same people. You know, same guards, same magistrates, like those players don't change. It's just the clients change from day to day. Um, so she's like, she goes to a desk where she's blatantly ignored. Now, this is a woman, even though she was just appointed to judge, she was a lawyer before. When you're a lawyer in court, you get a certain amount of deference. It's not great deference, but it's better than the deference of like the everyday people walking through. So there is some deference, and you really do get used to that. Um, and as a judge, she would not have to go through like the regular. Okay, there's like two layers of security. There's security for people who are not lawyers and security for people who are lawyers. But all that said, she would not have gone through either one of those. And so now she's going through security. She's like standing in line. She's like in the court which I'd set up before with the circus like atmosphere and like the food truck thing and all that. Um, and she says, so she's doing all that. She's like swallowing because she's also nervous because even though she's a judge, you get used to like your little courtroom microcosm, you know how that works, but every other courtroom works differently. Like even when I'm on like bar, like attorney listservs, they still call them listservs. I don't know, nothing changes. People are like, I'm familiar with this court, but now I have a client and I have to go 3 courtrooms over, 1 county over. Can you give me like the back channel information about how it works? Because each one is its own system, its own little system, own little fiefdom, honestly. Um, so she's like doing that, all of that. And one of the things that she doesn't like, and I noticed that I wrote, I've experienced court officers treating litigants as if they were a giant inconvenience. And obviously, their whole job is working in a courtroom, but it's not, it's a government job and people treat it as such. Um, so the other thing is what they talk about is so she's finally in this hearing. So they do have to have a hearing when they take kids emergency. It's an emergency hearing. So it's whatever, 24, whatever the number of hours is, but it's the next day, that it 2 days after. And one of the things, the first thing that Sheila asks is, she was like, is this a credible report? Can I get information about the report? So when you call these hotlines, they are usually, let's just say 90% of the time, I'm sure there's always exceptions, anonymous. And that's to protect the reporter. The idea is that if parents knew who reported them, they might go after them, et cetera, et cetera. And so she's like, who's the call from? The prosecutor objects. The prosecutor's Valerie Dodds. Oh my God. She may come back because now she is the county prosecutor in my universe. But she started here years ago. So it's Valerie Dodds, and she was like, "No, it's a secret." So the note I wrote is, while I have a strong belief in anonymous reporting, it's not foolproof. I handled more than one case where the quote unquote anonymous reporter was a wronged lover, neighbor, friend. Those cases created unnecessary chaos in a child's life who do not deserve to be brought into an immature adult dispute. And that's true. It's true. Which is why I say 90% of the time. Because as a person who's like doing that emergency investigation, you have to sort out kids being sex trafficked and like lit on fire from, I'm your neighbor and I hate you, I'm your ex-lover and I hate you, I have a grudge and I hate you, and I know that by calling social services, I can like muck with your life. It happens more often than I'd like. I'm just going to say that. So she's in this hearing and she was like, okay, so they've moved on. They're like, you can't know who it is in order to do this. Um, they're like, let's pull in a guardian ad litem. And the magistrate says, can you pull in someone from the hallway? We don't have a GAL in this case. I think I saw Patrick or maybe Ed out there. And she's aghast. She uses the word aghast. That the system is not more formal. Like they're going through a checklist and they're like, we got to pick the next person. And so often they would do that, especially if they thought the case needed to be expedited, because the formal appointment process just was slow. Like it was just a lot of papers, a lot of paperwork. I got appointments, well, both from being pulled in the hall, but I tried to stay out of the hall, and also from the formal process. But they'll send you literally, well, this, I'm sure it's changed. I'm sure they have like electronics, but I would get a postcard and they're like, you've been appointed as the guardian on such and such case. Here's the case number, and you'd have to go down and get the documents. I don't think they sent it to you. I really don't. I think you had to go get them. Um, but by then it had been weeks. So as a kindness, they pull somebody from the hallway. So at least you're not waiting weeks. I don't know. Like I don't know if it's better or worse. I said this happened all the time. While it does seem somewhat cavalier, the official procedure of going through the single employee at the juvenile court clerk's office tasked with GL assignments was random. It sometimes reminds me of the debate between a arranged marriage and a love match. I'm not sure which leads to a better outcome. That's cute. So that's, I'm not sure what leads to a better outcome. You hope somebody in the hallway is good. You hope you get an appointment that's good. Honestly, as I think about it years in the future, it doesn't matter. Like it's going to be random. It's like a judge. You pull a judge, you get a good one, you get a bad one. You get an assigned person to evaluate whether children should be returned. You get a good one, you get a bad one. Obviously, judges have to be lawyers. They have to go through training. Guardians have to be lawyers and they have to go through training. But training alone does not make everybody good at every job. sufficiently confident, sufficiently empathetic, sufficiently engaged. So it is what it is. And the goal is always to get the best that you can out of the system. And I think here at the end of chapter 16, Sheila realizes that maybe she's not going to get the best.